Have you ever wondered why a Rolex isn't just a watch? Why this simple object, something that only tells the time, can command the price of a luxury car, a small apartment, or even more? Imagine walking into a store and realizing that the waiting list for a steel Rolex, not even the gold one, is longer than for some exotic sports cars. How can a company selling something so small create an empire where every second ticks with prestige, power, and hidden secrets? Today, we are going to peel back the layers of one of the most mysterious and admired brands in the world. Because Rolex isn't only about telling time, it's about telling a story. And if you stick with me, you'll see that this story is as much about us as it is about them. Before we dive in, a quick moment. If you enjoy deep dives into mysteries, secrets, and the hidden worlds behind the things we think we know, make sure to like this video and subscribe. It takes only a second, but it helps bring you even more stories like this one. Now let's go back to the beginning. Rolex wasn't born as the giant we know today. It started in 1905, not in Switzerland but in London. Its founder, Hans Wilsdorf, was not Swiss. He was German, an orphan at a young age, who worked his way through hardship. And here's the strange part. At that time, wristwatches were seen as fragile, feminine accessories. Men carried pocket watches. To wear a wristwatch as a man was to risk being ridiculed. So why did Wilsdorf believe in it? Because he saw something nobody else wanted to see. The world was changing. Wars, machines, speed, modernity. Pocket watches would not survive this new age. Wilsdorf's idea was simple, but radical. Make the wristwatch reliable, strong, and precise, so that even men, soldiers, explorers, adventurers, would depend on it. But here's where the genius began. He didn't just sell watches, he sold trust. He promised people that this fragile-looking device could be as tough as the world they lived in. And little by little, Rolex became a brand not of watches, but of survival, of excellence, of proof. Think about this. In 1927, a young woman named Mercedes Gleitze swam across the English Channel. Around her neck was a Rolex Oyster, the world's first truly waterproof wristwatch. When she emerged, freezing and exhausted, her watch was still ticking perfectly. That moment wasn't just a marketing campaign, it was myth-making. Rolex wasn't selling a product, they were selling a symbol, the watch that conquers the impossible. And yet, the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Unlike many luxury brands, Rolex is not owned by shareholders, billionaires, or Wall Street. It is owned by a private trust in Geneva, the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. This means it doesn't have to chase quarterly profits. It doesn't release sales figures. It doesn't answer to the public. It's like a secret society, running one of the most desired brands on earth, behind closed doors. No other company like it exists in the luxury world. Doesn't that make you wonder? Why is it that we crave Rolex so much? Is it just because of the steel and gold? The diamonds and movements? No. The truth is more unsettling. Rolex sells scarcity. Artificial, carefully controlled scarcity. Walk into a Rolex boutique today and try to buy a stainless steel submariner, the watch James Bond wore in the early films. You'll be told politely that it's unavailable. The waiting list? Years long. But why? Rolex makes over 1 million watches a year. They could flood the market if they wanted. Instead, they restrict. They hold back. They make you wait. And the longer you wait, the more you desire. It's not about the watch. It's about the chase. It's the same psychology that makes diamonds valuable. The stone itself is not rare. What's rare is the feeling of exclusivity, of holding something others cannot have. Rolex has mastered this. They've turned stainless steel into treasure, not by chance, but by design. And yet, there's another side to this. Rolex doesn't market in the way you'd expect. You won't see emotional lifestyle ads with models on yachts. at least not in the way fashion houses do it. Instead, Rolex aligns itself with achievement. Mount Everest, deep sea dives, racing legends, tennis champions, explorers in freezing oceans. Every partnership, every story is about proof. Proof that their watches are more than accessories. Proof that they are instruments of human triumph. Take the Rolex Deep Sea Special, strapped to the outside of the bathyscaphe Trieste in 1960. When Jacques Picard and Don Walsh dove nearly 11 kilometers into the Mariana Trench. At the bottom of the ocean, under crushing pressure, the watch survived. Or Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay in 1953, climbing Mount Everest with Rolex on their wrists. These weren't ads, they were living legends. Rolex watches don't just tell time, they tell history. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Because Rolex has cultivated something deeper than history or prestige. It has created a ritual. Think of the moment a young graduate receives a Rolex from their parents, or a business owner buys their first submariner after years of hard work. It's not about the hours and minutes, it's about the symbol. A Rolex says, "You've made it. You belong to a world of success that others only dream of." And this is why Rolex is more than just a watch. It is a mirror that reflects our own hunger for status, achievement, and permanence. We don't wear it to know the time. We wear it to tell a story about ourselves. But if we stop here, we miss the most interesting part. Because Rolex's power isn't only in the product or the scarcity, it's in the silence. Have you noticed? Rolex never rushes. They don't make sudden changes. They don't release new models every season. Their designs, Submariner, Daytona, Datejust, remain nearly unchanged for decades. While fashion brands chase trends, Rolex waits, slowly, calmly, like a mountain. And that patience creates something strange. A Rolex never feels outdated. It feels eternal. This is deliberate. Rolex cultivates timelessness because time itself is their business. While other watches scream for attention, a Rolex whispers. And the whisper is louder than the scream. But there's a hidden tension here. If Rolex is eternal, then why do collectors fight so desperately for the newest models, the hardest to find ones? Why do auctions break records with Rolexes worn by Paul Newman or Steve McQueen? Why does the hunt never stop? Perhaps because in that silence, Rolex leaves a space we fill with our own desires. It's not just a brand, it's a canvas. We project onto it who we want to be. Adventurer, leader, icon. And that is the true genius of Rolex. They've built a company where every watch is more than steel, more than gears. Each one is a story, waiting to be told on someone's wrist. But the secrets go even deeper. For example, did you know that Rolex is one of the most vertically integrated watchmakers in the world? Unlike many luxury brands that outsource, Rolex makes almost everything in-house. Their own gold foundry, their own steel, their own research labs, their own gemologists who test every diamond, every sapphire. When you hold a Rolex, you're holding the result of an obsession with control. Nothing is left to chance. And yet, you'll never see the inside of their factories. Rolex guards its processes like state secrets. The level of security in their facilities is compared to banks. Employees pass through biometric scanners, ID checks, and multiple layers of security just to enter. Why so extreme? Because Rolex knows that mystery is power. The less you see, the more you imagine. But let me ask you something. Isn't there a paradox here? On one hand, Rolex thrives on tradition, on timelessness. On the other hand, it thrives on scarcity and desire, which are about change, about hunger. It is both eternal and urgent, still and moving. That paradox is exactly why it works. Rolex has mastered the balance of old and new, patience and longing. When you see someone wearing a Rolex, you might think they're showing off. But maybe they're not showing you the watch. Maybe they're showing you the story, their struggle, their triumph, their taste, their place in the world. And whether you admire it or resent it, you can't ignore it. Rolex is designed to be noticed, even in its quietness. And that brings us to one of the strangest truths of all. Rolex doesn't really compete with other watch brands. It competes with emotions, with human nature itself, with our hunger for meaning. That is why no matter how many smartwatches appear, no matter how advanced our phones become, Rolex doesn't fade. Because it isn't about function, it's about myth. And myths don't die. But let's go even further. Consider the social dynamics of Rolex ownership. There's an unspoken hierarchy in the world of watches, and Rolex sits at its peak. When you see someone casually checking the time on a Submariner at a cafe, there's a subtle recognition among those who know. It's a silent nod. This person has arrived, or at least, they've invested in the illusion of arrival. And here's the fascinating part. Rolex doesn't need to shout. Its power is in suggestion, in implication. In the small details only some will notice. Think about the crown logo. Simple, elegant, almost unassuming. But it communicates a world of authority, mastery, and excellence. And placement matters. Every element is meticulously designed. A Rolex isn't adorned for extravagance. It's adorned for recognition. You don't wear it to impress everyone. You wear it to impress those who matter. The subtlety is deliberate. The silence speaks volumes. And yet, despite all this prestige, Rolex manages to feel personal. The same company that builds fortress-like factories also creates watches that feel like extensions of ourselves. The curvature of the lugs, the weight of the bracelet, the precise click of the crown, it's tactile poetry. It's as if the watch was crafted to respond to the rhythm of your life. And maybe that's why collectors become obsessed. It's not just a possession, it's a companion, a witness to milestones, failures, and triumphs. And obsession is exactly what Rolex counts on. The secondary market for Rolexes is a fascinating world. Watches bought today may double or triple in value in a few years, even if you barely wear them. The Daytona, especially the Paul Newman model, sells for astronomical prices, with some reaching 7 figures at auction. Here's the hidden genius. Rolex doesn't manipulate the resale market directly. They simply remain scarce, consistent, and desirable, and human psychology does the rest. People hoard, speculate, and elevate the brand further without the company lifting a finger. The myth becomes self-sustaining. But scarcity alone isn't enough. Rolex also sells craftsmanship in ways few notice. Consider the movements inside. They are precise, durable, and engineered to last a lifetime. Each movement is meticulously tested to resist shocks, temperature changes, and even magnetic fields. The company invests in research that rivals scientific laboratories, yet few ever see this. You wear it, and it simply works, flawlessly, as if by magic. That seamless experience masks the decades of expertise behind it. You feel trust without even thinking about it. And that trust becomes loyalty, almost religious in its intensity. And speaking of religion, there's something almost spiritual in the ritual of owning a Rolex. Opening the box, feeling the weight, listening to the soft click of the bracelet, adjusting the crown. These moments aren't functional, they're ceremonial. A watch becomes a talisman, a small object with enormous meaning. That's why Rolex resonates on a level far beyond utility. It taps into desire, aspiration, and the human need to mark time, to make our lives tangible, measurable, and meaningful. Now let's take a closer look at design. Rolex watches are instantly recognizable, and yet deceptively simple. The Submariner, the Explorer, the Daytona. Each design has remained largely unchanged for decades. It's not laziness or lack of creativity, it's mastery of restraint. The shapes, proportions, and aesthetics are so perfectly balanced that minor changes could disrupt the harmony. In a world obsessed with novelty, Rolex teaches the power of permanence. A watch can be modern, timeless, and utterly desirable all at once. But permanence doesn't mean stagnation. Behind the scenes, Rolex innovates relentlessly. They've developed proprietary materials like Cerachrome, a ceramic so hard it resists scratches, and Rolesor, their patented blend of steel and gold. Every innovation is subtle, almost invisible, but it enhances durability, longevity, and beauty. The magic is that you don't notice it until you try to break it, and you can. The watch silently endures. The myth quietly grows. There's also an element of secrecy in their marketing. Rolex doesn't chase social media trends or influencer hype like other brands. Instead, they invest in credibility and achievement. Yacht racing, tennis, golf, exploration. They align with mastery, precision, and success. And here's the clever part. The associations are aspirational, but never ostentatious. They tell a story. If you wear a Rolex, you are a participant in this elite world of performance and accomplishment. They make success visible, but not boastful. Now, you might ask, what about value? Surely a watch is just a watch, and paying tens of thousands of dollars seems absurd. But Rolex transcends economics. It is simultaneously a product, a status symbol, an investment, and a cultural artifact. Its value isn't measured in dollars alone. It's measured in desire, recognition, and the stories it carries. A Rolex bought today could be worth double in a decade, but even if it never appreciates, it holds value in narrative and emotion. That's the invisible currency Rolex trades in, and it's far more durable than any stock market trend. And that brings us to an unsettling truth. Rolex is a master of human psychology. Every choice they make, scarcity, design, secrecy, partnerships, interacts with our deepest drives. We want exclusivity, but not isolation. We crave recognition, but in subtle elite circles. We admire tradition, but yearn for innovation. Rolex balances all these contradictions, almost like a magician manipulating perception. The result? Obsession, admiration, and loyalty so intense, it borders on fanaticism. Even the act of buying a Rolex is carefully choreographed. You don't just walk in and pick one up. You are invited subtly to participate in a ritual. The boutique feels quiet, private, and controlled. The staff are knowledgeable but discreet. The process is slow, deliberate, and deliberate. You aren't just purchasing a watch. You are proving yourself worthy of the myth, part of a silent hierarchy that only the patient, the discerning, and the determined can join. And once you're inside, once you hold that watch, the psychological hooks are complete. You are bound to the story, the history, the brand, and the community of those who wear it. Consider also the global cultural impact. Rolex doesn't merely exist, it permeates cinema, literature, music, and fashion. From James Bond's iconic Submariner to hip-hop lyrics celebrating Daytona watches, it appears across cultural strata. Each appearance reinforces the myth, creating a feedback loop. The watch is desirable because it is famous, and it is famous because it is desirable. And no other brand in horology achieves this level of cultural saturation without overexposure. Rolex strikes the balance of visibility and mystique perfectly. Yet there is a subtle danger in all this. The allure of Rolex can create obsession, envy, and anxiety. Some see the brand not as inspiration, but as a benchmark they feel they must meet. Collectors can spend fortunes chasing a single model, waiting years, negotiating, bidding, and scheming. Rolex itself does nothing to encourage frenzy, but it thrives in it. That's the paradox. The company remains silent, yet it controls desire more effectively than any advertiser ever could. And here's another hidden layer. Rolex's approach to legacy. Each watch is not just an object. It is a potential heirloom, passed down through generations. The weight, the craftsmanship, the enduring design. These factors ensure that the watch is not disposable, not ephemeral. It becomes part of family stories, memories, and personal histories. You're not buying a status symbol alone. You're buying continuity, immortality in miniature. All of this explains why Rolex ownership carries such emotional weight. A watch becomes a marker of achievement, yes, but also a mirror of self. It's a compact narrative, a tiny vessel holding identity, aspiration, and memory. Every glance at the wrist recalls a story. The long hours, the risks, the victories, the choices. In this sense, Rolex is not just a luxury item, it's a companion, a chronicle, and a symbol of human ambition. But despite all this, Rolex remains elusive. It doesn't reveal its secrets openly. The company's leadership operates quietly, focusing on control, innovation, and myth-making. The result is a brand that feels organic, inevitable, almost fated. You sense a hidden hand guiding not the market, but desire itself. And when you own a Rolex, you realize you are participating in something larger than a transaction. You are part of a narrative crafted over a century, one that elevates simple mechanics into a symbol of endurance, precision, and prestige. At this point, you might begin to see the truth. Rolex is a masterclass in storytelling, psychology, and culture. It is not just a product, nor merely a symbol of wealth. It is an instrument of influence, shaping perception and aspiration simultaneously. It teaches lessons in patience, desire, and the subtle art of control. It reminds us that value is rarely intrinsic. It is constructed, curated, and maintained through perception, scarcity, and narrative. And there's beauty in that construction. Rolex doesn't need to scream for attention. It doesn't need flashy campaigns or gimmicks. Its story unfolds naturally, like a whisper that grows louder the longer you listen. The myths, the achievements, the scarcity, the rituals, all these elements converge to make a Rolex more than a watch. They make it a phenomenon, a cultural landmark, a symbol of what humans can create when precision meets vision, patience meets ambition, and tradition meets imagination. Now let's reflect on the human side of Rolex. Behind every watch is a story of desire, patience, and achievement. The person who buys a Rolex is not just acquiring a product, they are acquiring a symbol of effort, endurance, and aspiration. It could be the first Rolex after years of work, a reward for a personal milestone, or a family heirloom passed down for generations. The emotional weight is as real as the metal and movement inside. And that is precisely what Rolex understands better than any other luxury brand. Humans don't buy objects, they buy stories. Even the most casual observer senses it. When a Rolex peeks from under a cuff, it evokes curiosity and respect. It suggests confidence, taste, and accomplishment without a single word. Unlike flashy logos or loud branding, Rolex whispers. And that whisper is more potent than any declaration. It's subtle, yet irresistible. And yet the allure of Rolex is not universal. It has a paradox. The same watch that signifies status for one person can represent obsession or superficiality for another. Some see the hype and scarcity as manipulative. Others see it as inspiration. This duality is part of Rolex's genius. By remaining slightly out of reach, slightly mysterious, it provokes desire, admiration, and debate simultaneously. It is a brand that cannot be ignored, but it cannot be fully possessed either, not in a way that dilutes its myth. Consider the rituals of collectors. Some study catalogs, auctions, and serial numbers obsessively. They track subtle variations in dials, bezels, and bracelets that most would overlook. Each model, each year, tells a story. And yet, even in this microcosm, Rolex maintains control. The company sets the rules silently through design, scarcity, and quality. Collectors compete within these constraints, unknowingly participating in the brand's carefully orchestrated narrative. Rolex doesn't chase trends. It creates them by doing nothing and letting the world react. This leads us to a deeper truth. Rolex is about mastery, not just of watchmaking, but of human perception. They understand psychology, sociology, and culture at a level that rivals the greatest marketers, yet their methods are subtle, almost invisible. They never shout, never bribe, never manipulate openly. They influence desire, status, and aspiration through control, quality, and storytelling. Every detail, from the crown logo to the oyster case, contributes to an ecosystem of meaning. And this mastery extends beyond watches. Rolex has become a cultural lens through which we measure achievement. It appears in films, music, sports, and literature, not because it is ostentatious, but because it signifies mastery, perseverance, and ambition. A Rolex in a scene signals success and credibility instantly. It is shorthand for human accomplishment, understood across cultures and generations. But the most fascinating aspect of Rolex might be its silence. Unlike many luxury brands that rush, release, and advertise, Rolex waits. They allow their reputation to grow organically. Their innovation is incremental, precise, and deliberate. Their scarcity is controlled, not forced. Their mystique is carefully preserved, and the effect is profound. A Rolex becomes timeless not because of design alone, but because time itself is part of the brand. The watch, the company, and the myth all move in sync with the human perception of time, measured, controlled, and enduring. Even the auctions reveal the depth of Rolex's cultural impact. Watches once worn by celebrities or athletes fetch astronomical sums, far beyond their material value. A Paul Newman Daytona can sell for millions, not because of gold or steel, but because of story, history, and myth. Each transaction is a continuation of the narrative Rolex has been crafting for over a century. It is a story in which every participant, buyer, seller, observer, plays a part, and therein lies the ultimate lesson. Rolex is not a product. It is a masterclass in narrative, perception, and human psychology. It teaches us that scarcity creates desire, patience enhances value, and consistency builds trust. It reminds us that objects are powerful not for what they are, but for what they represent. A Rolex is a tool, a symbol, and a story, all at once. It condenses ambition, achievement, and aspiration into a tiny, wrist-worn package. Even after a century, Rolex continues to captivate. New models, subtle innovations, and careful partnerships ensure that the myth evolves without ever breaking. The company remains private, independent, and deliberate. Every choice is a lesson in control, patience, and power. Rolex demonstrates that the greatest luxury is not material. It is mastery over perception, desire, and culture. And perhaps that is why we are so drawn to it. Because in a world where time feels fleeting, a Rolex offers permanence. In a society obsessed with visibility, it offers subtlety. In a culture that often confuses wealth with meaning, it offers narrative and legacy. It is, in every sense, more than a watch. When you understand this, a Rolex stops being a product and becomes a phenomenon. Every tick, every detail, every whisper of its crown tells a story of ambition, precision, and human endeavor. It is a symbol of mastery, both of craft and of self. And the irony is that the same watch that measures time also transcends it. It turns fleeting moments into enduring stories. So the next time you see a Rolex, don't just see a watch. See the century of innovation, the countless stories of survival and triumph, the psychological genius, and the cultural significance embedded in every component. Consider the patience, the rituals, and the myths it carries. Consider that it is not just an object, but a vessel for ambition and achievement. In its quiet, controlled way, it teaches lessons far beyond horology. Lessons about desire, perception, and what it means to mark one's life in time. And here's the final truth. Rolex works because it is human. It understands our aspirations, fears, and obsessions. It doesn't dominate through force. It seduces through meaning. It doesn't scream for attention. It commands it through precision, story, and myth. It doesn't need us to understand it fully. It only needs us to want it. And in that desire, we become part of its story, just as it becomes part of ours. Rolex is more than just a watch because it reflects the deepest parts of ourselves. It embodies our need for recognition, permanence, and achievement. It bridges the gap between material and meaning, between function and narrative. It is a triumph of design, psychology, and cultural storytelling. And in the end, it leaves us with one simple, enduring fact. A Rolex is not measured in minutes. It is measured in moments, in stories, and in the human spirit. So when you think of a Rolex, remember, it is more than steel, gold, or diamonds. It is a chronicle, a symbol, and a masterclass in desire. It is history, ambition, and psychology condensed into a wristwatch. And if you pay attention, it teaches a lesson that lasts longer than any lifetime. Mastery, patience, and meaning are timeless. If you've enjoyed this journey into the secret world of Rolex, make sure to subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden layers behind the world's most fascinating brands.